Hi, Ray Dickey from Association Out Now, South Carolina CI and Hudson Valley CI. Thank you so much for being here today. Careful words, 3 million big consequences. Defamation warning for association stakeholders. We're not kidding. This did happen. It is something that you need to know about. If you have questions or you have comments, I know this is a pre-recorded segment. You can still use that question feature if you have it, and I should get those questions. If you are here for CEUs, watch for the 3 time prompts. The first one right now, one in the middle, and one at the end. Jot down the approximate time you see each one, then use the CEU form link in the description. Thank you for watching. All right, we're back. Make sure you follow those CEU instructions if you're here for CEUs. With that being said, I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves with who I see first, and that is Dawn.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Dawn Becker-Durnan, and I'm a community insurance risk management specialist with accusation. We are a full-service insurance agency. We are both national as well as international.
All right, and Corey.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Corey Kravitz. I'm the managing principal of Kovich, Schifrin, Nesbitt's Florida office. We're a national community association law firm with offices in Florida, Illinois, and Indiana.
And Dave Byrne.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Byrne. I am the partner in charge of my law firm's community associations practice, Ansel, Grimm, and Aaron. We represent condominiums, HOAs, and cooperatives in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania.
And Dave, I'm honestly not trying to embarrass you. I do admire you about this. You're in the process of, are you fostering some more dogs?
Yeah, 2 upstairs.
Yeah. And you go to the shelter for these, right?
Yeah, these particular ones were, they were part of like 25 that were rescued from some horrible barbarian loser who was hoarding them, and then a crappy house in a crappy town in New Jersey. So we're holding on to them for a while to keep them from having to stay in an overcrowded shelter.
See, Dave, lawyers do have hearts. See, okay.
I would foster
John.
dogs. I never foster people. Let's put it that way.
All right. John
Legumina from the Legumina Law Firm in Purchase, New York. We represent condominiums, co-ops, and HOAs from New York City throughout the Hudson Valley areas.
And you know, John, not to hold us up, but I was just going to say how nice, out of everyone's office and work environment, I thought yours was the nicest. And then at the last minute, you faded it all out like you didn't like it or something. It looked really kind of comfortable. All right. With that being said, so we're going to do careful words, 3 million big consequences. Dawn was nice enough to send this over to me. I'm going to let you fill in the blanks here, Dawn, with the part that I don't get. We're not going to mention all the names here because there's just no reason to. If you want to find out who's who, you can look it up for yourself. It's mostly all public record, I think, here. I mean, I certainly didn't get any information that's not public record. This is a North Carolina case, but it could have, you know, implications anywhere. Hold on a second, audience. Dawn, do you hear that tapping?
I do. It's not me.
Yes. We all know who it is, don't we?
Dave.
Who's our lawyer that makes noises? Everyone knows. Dave, are you typing?
No.
Corey? Was it you?
Oh, my keyboard's over here.
Was it you?
That's good evidence.
Was it you? Oh my gosh, it was Dawn. I am so sorry, Dave. All right, whoever was typing.
I've been wrongly accused many times before. It's okay.
Okay, I apologize then. I thought for sure it was you, based on your peanut crunching past escapades and the like. Okay, let me start over. So this is a case that took place in North Carolina. It was a developer-controlled community, and it kind of becomes a cautionary example of how HOA disputes could end up in big bucks because people that lived in the community and some of the board members were sued, and they lost by the developer. This took place around April 13th, 2026. There was like little over $3 million in punitive damages. And the lawyers will explain what this means, a conspiracy claim and all kinds of things like that. There was defamation judgments against individual homeowners. And the court did later address some legal limits and post-trial issues. But the wording remains clear. Public accusations can create serious personal legal exposure. We talk about it all the time, Dawn, but sometimes I don't think people believe us. So you're a little bit familiar with this case. You sent it to me. Fill in the blanks.
So I'm out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is all over the news here. And what really piqued my interest was a news article that said the homeowners' dues were going to $1,500 a month, and there was going to be a $10,000 special assessment. Being in this business, knowing and reading financials, that set off a red alert to me. I said, what happened? Was there a lawsuit? Was there a judgment? What kind of financial pickle happened that they need to assess the homeowner such a large fee, especially in a single family homeowners association where we typically don't see assessments of that magnitude. So as I dove into the case, I discovered this was something where the developer was accused of certain things by the homeowners, and the homeowners took the developer to court, and that is where we see the fees and the assessments. But when I dug deeper, I saw that this was a very complicated case. And as you pointed out earlier, it goes to the warning of be careful what you say.
Dawn, didn't we discuss to this? I'm not sure the details, and you may not remember. We spoke about this probably months ago. This is financially devastating for the owners because they're still on the hook for what, I didn't know this existed in our industry. I don't want to get sidetracked, but you talk a little bit about when a developer owns and continues to own such a majority of the community, how the owners are basically held hostage. And by the way, audience, we're not saying that this developer did that. I before the attorneys came on, I was just commenting this guy's already been suing people for defamation, so I don't mind commenting. I don't want to imply that I'm saying that he did this or did not do this. But can you talk a little bit about what the scenario was and how this is so devastating, not only for the board, but for these owners, this developer?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So on a grant overview, from insurance perspective, why do we look at financials? Well, we're looking at financials to determine the health of the community, most importantly. It also is a great indicator of whether there's going to be any type of lawsuits in the future from assessments, et cetera. But we also not only look at financials, but we want to know the composition of a board. And when we have a majority owner or a board that is controlled, let's say by a builder or developer, often the decisions that are made are sometimes could be to benefit themselves, or there could be an issue with transparency. And oftentimes homeowners will claim that there is a lack of information from the controlling parties, which then we start to see developing into litigation. So a lot of our insurance carriers are very concerned when we have a majority ownership, a majority board, a majority owner on the board, controlling the board.
And Dawn, the accusations and the conflict between the owners, the board, and the developer were very serious accusations. I'm doing from memory here, so I could be wrong, and it may not even refer to this case, but I think it was similar to this. They were accusing the developer of purchasing goods and equipment and basically throwing the bill at them and putting it on because the developer controlled the budget. They were accusing the developer of financial improprieties in buying these. It was a lot of money, Dawn. A lot of money that was involved here. This wasn't just a bunch of owners and board members saying, oh, let's just bash the manager or let's bash the developer. They were throwing out some really serious accusations here. Is that accurate?
It is, but I think in looking at some of the details, and the attorneys here will get into that, I don't know if it was at first glance for the homeowners a situation of where is the money and where is it going, but there were some infrastructure items that were promised when they purchased that were not yet built. And so the concern, of course, from everybody is where is the money going and who is paying? But I think the bigger course to that is the homeowners claim that there was a lack of communication and a lack of information, and perhaps on their end, a lack of understanding of how a homeowners association essentially works.
All right, now, Corey, go ahead, Dawn, I apologize.
One caveat to this, and this is just special to this community, it appears that there's more renters in this community than there are owners. And that is another issue that insurance carriers really don't like to see, is a majority renters. Of course, renters don't care about the community as much as a homeowner would. And also it could be more transient of a lifestyle. So homeowners who live there maybe have some concerns. And in this case, the rentals, I believe, and correct me attorneys if I'm wrong, but the rentals were also a rental company of the developer builder. So I think the homeowners had concern about all the fingers in the pot.
I'm going to go to Corey in a second here, but basically the way the situation stands for the most part is that the owners don't have a lot of say in what their assessments are. And they're basically going to have to pay whatever they want to pay unless they want to keep going to court. And they already, it appears, kind of lost, and we'll let the attorneys determine whether it really was a loss or not a loss. But that's basically what we're looking at here, Dawn, right? A bunch of owners and board got together, put a bunch of stuff out there in the public realm, did some lawsuits. Not only did they lose their case where they're on the hook and they're at the developer's whim, I guess, they got hit with a defamation lawsuit and they lost. Is that pretty close to?
It is, and we talk about this all the time. I think I've said several times on the show that homeowners are not immune to lawsuits from managers and from boards. And if you have an issue with your board, it's really important to put items in writing and also to follow up in a professional way. When we start to call people names and we start to write things on social media, it really crosses the line. And in this case, I think we've seen what happens, and that's a large judgment.
All right. So Corey, before we get into like what people should do and not do, can you help me sufficiently scare the audience into paying attention to what we're going to be talking about based on some of the similarities you can find in this case?
I mean, this was essentially a counter suit. The owners brought the lawsuit against the developer and the developer controlled association board or association, and then the developer / HOA countersued and went after the owners for alleged defamatory statements made to local officials, other neighbors, and other people.
But the HOA was developer controlled. So when the HOA sued the owners, it was developer controlled at that point, Corey?
Yes.
Okay. And what were some of the other circumstances in the case that this is a devastating case for these owners and I guess the board. I hate to say the board because it's developer control. Can you explain it better?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that I saw, and the case is still ongoing. There's some post judgment appellate type things going on. But what stood out the most was the actual damages. The actual damages were nominal. In some cases, it was $1. But the jury awarded punitive damages that actually exceeded state of North Carolina's punitive damage limits. So the court had to lower it a little bit. So this was a jury determination of punitive damages, not so much actual damages.
Dave, I don't know if you had a chance to look over the case in detail or not, but I still want to stay on the theme of telling people that this can happen to them. I hate to say it that way, but can you help me get that point across? This was a serious issue.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the case. A lot of states have anti-SLAPP suits. I mean, which is, I'm not an expert on that, but a lot of people like developers, powerful interests, use defamation suits to intimidate or, get people to abandon their otherwise protected free speech rights by keeping their mouths shut. So it's very risky. At least I know, like in New Jersey, for instance, it's risky for a developer to file a claim in response. Like Corey's saying, the developer controlled board of the developer was responding to a lawsuit filed against them. In some states, that might be called a SLAPP suit, meaning that it's not really about defamation. It's about intimidating people to keep their mouth shut. And if you lose a case like that, you're also on the hook for punitive damages and attorney fees. So some states make it really perilous for powerful interests to try to use defamation as a way to limit people's free speech.
Dawn, maybe you could think about it while I go to John. Do you remember what they were originally going to have to pay the owners where they're at? It's like a devastating amount of money for them. It's not I don't think it was a wealthy community. I don't know if you had the
assessments. So it's a single family home community. I believe there's 80 homes, and the price range of the homes or the sale price is pretty low. It's on the, under $500,000 per home, new construction, obviously. And Charlotte area is growing, so we're seeing a lot of people move from out of the area, especially people who've never been in an HOA. I know, if you move from New Jersey, you might not be familiar, for example. So the assessments, I believe, went to $1,500 a month, plus a $10,000 special assessment. And for anybody, who's on a budget, that can be extremely tough, especially if you just purchased the home and your mortgage is set for a certain amount. Now you're going to add on these fees. It's probably financially devastating for some homeowners. And the ones that were interviewed on TV did say that it was economically devastating for them.
And John, add whatever you want to add where we're at so far, but these owners are basically walking on eggshells, I would assume, to a certain extent at this point. And I'm sure they're still accusing this developer of improprieties, maybe privately. I'm not sure, of course, but John, can you take it from there?
Yeah, well, I would expect at this point they wouldn't be privately saying anything because the consequences were pretty damning for the owners. So the owners brought the lawsuit. Dawn had mentioned. So this is kind of a we'll call it like a counter lawsuit, counterclaim, and there's a lot. It's very involved. There's a lot going on, but among the things are that I saw that in the court. The court monitored it, but in the very beginning of the case, the plaintiffs, that's the unit owners, asked the court to stop the HOA from assessing. Dawn mentioned the extremely high assessments. Before the case started, I believe there were newspaper articles, kind of supporting the plaintiffs. So that might have encouraged the plaintiffs to, that we're going to go to court and win. But so to get an injunction, I know in New York and definitely it looks like in North Carolina, if a court's going to grant it, you need to post a bond in case it turns out the injunction wasn't legitimate. So they initially, I think, had post a $10,000 bond, the court bumped it up to 60 based on all the legal documents that were filed, and so it seems like it was like a well-intentioned effort by the plaintiffs to correct what they and the newspapers there thought was like an outrage, and it seems like it slowly but surely backfired on the unit owners because not only because of the defamatory statements mentioned, but because of the whole process of blocking a homeowners association from actually assessments so that they could pay their bills. That's a drastic remedy, and the courts aren't going to just willy-nilly give it to you. If you want it, not only are you going to have to prove that you're likely to win the case, but you're going to have to post bonds. So this is like an exercise in for plaintiffs' attorneys thinking, this is a bad HOA situation once again, like we read in the papers all the time, and we're going to go get them. Definitely in North Carolina, think twice before you do that.
Ray, can I ask John and Corey a question to read the case? So was the defamation, the dichotomy here seems weird because it's a developer controlled association. Like owners usually have a qualified privilege to say things about an association in the context of the governance of the association, at least we're in the states where I practice. But was the issue here that it was targeting the developer by name and therefore hurting the developer's business? Or was it more about the association doing something it shouldn't be doing? And hopefully I asked that question correctly.
I think it was both because the association was a named party as well. So I think it was both. But there was, and the jury found that there was no, I read the judgment, there was no there was no privileges, um, available to them as a defense.
Hmm.
What was the defamation exactly? I mean, I should have asked this in the beginning. Like, what did they say about this guy that got this huge judgment? Did they say completely outrageous things and he was a murderer, or where did this fall? Like, I think this is maybe the most important question here in a way, right? How far did they take it?
I don't know 100% of exactly what was said, but I know that there was comments to uh, government officials, and it's usually along the lines of, they're stealing money, that we're being ripped off, they were supposed to build things, bait and switch, you know, they may not have been 100% informed in exactly what they were saying, and obviously it went beyond just opinion. And if you're exerting an opinion, that's obviously a defense to any defamation. But here the court found that it was not an opinion. They were asserting it as actual facts.
Right, because I'm remembering a little bit because I did kind of read through it, not as a lawyer. And I don't remember any defamation that was like he's a murderer. It was kind of, I hate to say it, doesn't mean it's right. Corey, it was kind of the run of mill stuff that I've been seeing for years that people have been doing. And this is the first time I've ever seen any ramifications from it. What do you think about that?
We often see, defamation lawsuits pop up. At least in Florida, it's difficult. It's difficult to bring them. And I should take a step back and just talk about. I don't know the elements in North Carolina, but the elements in Florida are pretty simple that you have to prove. You have to prove that there was a publication to a third party, and that publication can be either written or verbal. If it's written, it's generally called libel. If it's verbal, it's generally called slander. Um, Otherwise, it's the same thing. That communication has to be false. The truth is always a defense, if it otherwise. And then there's also a determination of um, whether the person is a public figure or not. That changes the level of the burden of proof. If it's a private person, it's a lower standard of basically negligence. If it's a public official, then you have to show that is basically um, intentional and malicious. Um, and at least in Florida, HOAs are not really considered, or board members are not considered public figures. It's still generally private, unless somehow they assert themselves into a public issue. And then you have to prove actual damages. So that's usually the hard part when we have, board members say, these people are saying things about us. We're saying, what are your damages? Were you fired from your job? Did you know that's usually the biggest thing. You lose your reputation, you lose your job, and if there's no damages, then it's what are you doing this for? um, you know in this particular case in North Carolina, it's punitive damages, but that's punitive damages are not easy to get. So usually at that point, once we counsel on damages, sometimes it's cheaper just to sell your house and move somewhere else.
So Dawn, I'm going to jump over to John and Dave, but I'm going to ask them and Corey, and I'll say Corey for last on it since he mentioned it, because I'm always curious about this. People feel like if they say it's in my opinion, they can just say whatever they want to say about anybody. I hear this all the time. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I know I brought it up before. So, but John, what is the story? People, I see it all the time in my building. People put stuff on Facebook, and in my opinion, I mean, do you need me to give you some examples to work off, John, or can you just kind of run with that? How far can you take, in my opinion?
You could take it. You could take it pretty far, right? Because opinion is protected. You better make it clear that it's just your opinion. Now, in this case, just to briefly get into what the extent of the let's just call it I think they were held to have made defamatory statements on social media platforms and with government officials. But so they for one of the, I was reading the discovery responses, and they had a private Facebook group for Magnolia Cove. They also had multiple communications with news outlets, government officials. Like, for example, they would go on television and discuss the lack of lawn care, mailboxes, the construction of the pool. Another interview about, the HOA not doing what they should have. Then someone filed a complaint against one of the sponsors' principals for involving water repairs and a sewer leak. Discrimination inquiry was made to the Human Relations Commission. The licensing board for general contractors was complained to, for a claim of fraudulent use of a license, etc. So like there is a lot that went on here that I guess the cumulative effect, at least on the jury, was that this hurt the sponsor and the sponsor controlled association. And there's really many details, but so I don't know at any point that the owners making complaints made it clear that these were just their opinions.
Okay, so Dawn sent me over. Dawn, I'm not going to use names or anything in what you sent me, and obviously you pulled this off the internet, so we don't know if it's accurate, right? Is it all right with you, Dawn, if I just go?
Yeah, I wouldn't mention names, but it is from the court meetings directly, and they are quotes that the court put into the documents.
Okay, so is it all right with you, Dawn, if I just go through some of these on the premise that it could be inaccurate and we're just doing the best we can with it? Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, paraphrasing. This person needs to be behind bars for all the criminal activity they were doing. And once again, audience, I'm changing some of the words around.
That's defamation. I mean, to me, that's like standard hyperbole opinion.
The developer committed fraud with the marketing and sales of homes in this community. Yeah, his actions are restraining trade. I assume this is the developer. Practices were predatory, discriminatory, and they committed elder abuse. I did not miss, Dawn, I did not throw that in there. You'll back me up on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in there.
They would pick up and take over permits. So this, I guess, developer could continue their devious work ethics. And this person was their minion and this and that. Oh boy.
I think,
go ahead, go on.
just to point out, I think when I look at this, what struck me is that they were naming the developer's personal name in these accusations from the homeowners. And I think that really crosses lines. We're not speaking about a business per se or the association. They were bringing specific people's names and other businesses into it that this individual owned. So it really crossed a lot of platforms there in what they were saying. So they were personal attacks on individuals that own the developer company and or builder company.
So Dave, my first question is, what's your comments on these kind of comments? They vary. Some of them, they're pretty bad. And then other ones, I don't know. I see these all the time though. I mean, I see people accused of being criminals, board members, management companies, vendors on a regular basis on Facebook. This is why this case is scary. And the second thing is, if they had just put in my opinion, would that be okay? Could someone say, in my opinion, this person's a criminal? So can you
it would make it putting in it's like, that's why newspapers use allegedly. I gather it gives the person who's speaking or writing, it gives them a greater defense. I'm surprised, frankly, that anything would get this far. Corey, I think, made a comment earlier about maybe some of his clients asking. I mean, these defamation claims, speaking frankly, I think they're almost all garbage. I mean, I find them in this context. You know, if you're Johnny Depp and someone calls you says you physically abused someone in an article in the newspaper, and you lose a movie contract with Pirates of the Caribbean Part 7 for $30 million, that's defamation. But, you know, when you say your board members are lazy and stupid and they've got their hand in the till and all these hyperbolic kind of statements, I find it remarkably difficult to think that anything could ever be defamation. And on a practical level, you know, there's no fee shifting with these things, meaning you pay a lawyer for them, they go on forever and ever. You depose people, your legal fees are massive. And in New Jersey, it's almost impossible to get punitive damages. I mean, you could be a chemical company and dump chemicals in the Delaware River and probably not get punitive damages. It's just very difficult to get. So this could be one of those that like once in a lifetime kind of things. Maybe I don't know. I'm very skeptical of it transcending this particular odd set of facts. But I could be wrong.
I'd be nervous if I would look at this two ways. If I was a board member, I would look at it like I could find myself at the receiving end of this, or I could use this against owners that are doing the same thing against me. Corey, you didn't have these comments when I first started with you. And one thing I want to ask you, just to bring it home here. So let's say one of the comments was in that he committed elder abuse. Well, are you telling me if I say, and in my opinion, he committed elder abuse, you can get off scot-free then?
No, I don't think so. I think the court would look at whether or not the communication that was asserted is factually verifiable or not. So, you know, it's always like the treasurer, in my opinion, the treasurer embezzled $100,000. Well, you can verify or not if $100,000 is missing. And so whether or not you say, in my opinion, it still could be defamatory. If you say, you know, in my opinion, I don't trust the board, or I forget the in my opinion, say I don't trust the board, that's not defamatory. That's purely opinion. So just because you say in my opinion, it doesn't give you immunity.
I feel like, Dawn, and I'll go to the lawyers on this, these people that were against the developer and the homeowner, I feel like they could have just done things a little bit differently with their wording. It would have had the same impact for what they were trying to accomplish, and it wouldn't even be close to this. What do you think? You think the lawyers are going to agree?
Well, I think so as well. And I believe the judge in this case actually put that statement into this docket that the homeowners, if you are disputing charges or budget, whatever it might be, there is a more professional way to do that versus rabble rousing.
I mean, if you're going to accuse someone of fraudulent activities, you could just change the wording around a little bit to like, it appears to be fraud to me. I don't know. Don't take audience for what I'm saying. That's the thing. But okay, so these are the comments. Dawn, before I go to the lawyers to kind of give us advice where we should go from here, this to me is, I'm all over the place on this. Like 1 minute I'm like, oh, the developer, the mean developer. And then I read some of these comments and I'm like, well, that's not fair. Even if he's not a great developer and he's doing all these other things, to accuse someone of elder abuse, you should have either it's true or it's not. You know what I mean?
Well, you know,
what does it have to do with anything? Why would you throw it in there? So this just seems like, really, but it's scary to me because I see these comments every day in our industry.
But isn't the allegation of elder abuse per se hyperbole in a context of a real estate transaction? It's like it's like a play on words. It's like, you know, I mean, I would look at it like it's obviously not defamatory. It's obviously someone trying to be sarcastic. You sold a house to an old guy and the house sucks. It's elder abuse. It's not like I'm in an actual nursing home. And that to me would be, like Corey said, provable. Like if you sell a house to an old guy and you sold me a bad house, I would sarcastically say it's his elder abuse. It seems like an obvious thing that anybody would say in a sarcastic way. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. I just see it differently, I guess.
I think exaggerated criticism is protected speech also. So it really has to be, you know, so-and-so is a child molester.
Yeah, right.
that it has to be, you have to look at the context of the whole statement.
Okay, so let me ask you guys this then, because that's super interesting that Dave brought this up. I'm pretty sarcastic myself, so I'm pretty good at picking up when people are being sarcastic, right? In this case, I didn't pick up as this being sarcastic. I read it, and the way I interpreted it was this individual was being accused of elder abuse. And yes, I'm thinking of physically abusing an elder. Then, Dave, that is either your true personal opinion or you did your lawyer opinion, which is just equally impressive. And Corey did the same thing. But
you read that as like the accusation was that this X person put his hands on this person and actually assaulted them with battery and harm and physical contact.
Dawn, you're also you're not easily fooled by sarcasm, but what did you think of that? I was struck home. Like, I actually did think of that it was real elder abuse. I feel silly about it. Maybe I'm dumb on this one.
I think in the context, a lot of people look at elder abuse and will assert financial crimes, in that same vein.
Good point.
Are easily parted with their money and foolable. So that was more of my opinion on that. But I also did take the sarcasm. This is elder abuse. Gosh darn it.
Why do it? Okay. Corey, I didn't want to. Were you still finishing your thought on that elder abuse thing? I know I went to Dave and I didn't go back to you to wrap it up, but you did the same. You came up with the same. You agreed with Dave. Were you doing your lawyer thing, or were you, if you don't mind sharing, or was that your personal opinion, or a combination of both?
No, I think it was a legal analysis lawyer thing, because I think it's important to examine the context. You don't. Especially in this country where you have, obviously protected speech against the government, but protected speech overall is still really important. And you don't want to, part of, I don't know, maybe I'm getting philosophical, but you go to these board meetings and most people just want to be heard. So if you're forcing people, if you're putting duct tape over people's mouths to the extent where they're afraid to say stuff, then that's not good either. That'll cause more conflict. So I think when, the bottom line with defamation is, be careful what you say if you're saying something that you're saying is factual. If you don't know what you're talking about, then maybe that could be hyperbole or exaggerated speech. But if you're definitively saying something factual that's false, that's where you get into trouble.
So Dawn, this will be the last one, I think. This one's pretty rough. Are you comfortable with me paraphrasing it and doing the whole routine? Okay. So this was I guess Dawn is, getting this off the internet. Once again, I'll do my own little disclaimer here. We're getting this off the internet and we don't know what's accurate or not accurate. And we're just talking about broad strokes here. So we're not claiming that this was actually what was said or anything, but I'm going to communicate what we paraphrase. I'm 100% paraphrasing. There was commentary about devious work ethics. Okay. Several run-ins with the law that include violence. If I, has been known to almost hit neighbors with his car to scare them. None of us feel safe here. Scum of the earth. I mean, okay, scum of the earth, I don't have a problem with, believe it or not. All these other items, but man, several run-ins at the law that include violence. So once again, you're not going to get off scot-free, John, right? Because you just say, in my opinion, he's had several run-ins with the law that include violence. I mean, it should be accurate.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty. That's a smear, right? They're making an implication that not only is a person a terrible builder sponsor, but he has violent tendencies. I mean, even if you couch that within an opinion. By the way, I didn't even think that was couched with an opinion. Yeah, that's just I think that's.
It wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's conflating and exaggerating.
Yeah, the trouble, Ray, the troubling aspect of that statement, I thought, was I saw him almost hit people with a car. I mean, to me, that goes exactly what Corey said before, which that's a verifiable.
Correct it.
Right? What was it? What was the?
He
What was
had
the?
been known. He had been known to almost hit people with his car.
I don't know. That's a pretty. I'm to me that's a statement of fact. One thing I'll bring this up again. One thing that I watched the Johnny Depp trial every day when it was on. Lawyer, I can't get enough of being a lawyer. And one thing I did pick up on was, and I think this is useful, because as part of our practice, we see defamation. We don't see like these cases go to trial and stuff. It just doesn't really happen often, if at all. One thing I learned when I watched that, I think it's useful for people too, is they were very specific about the actual thing. It wasn't like a generalized, you talk badly about me. Johnny Depp had 3 specific things. One was the title of the article, and then there were other 2 specific things in the article that he focused on and had to prove specifically that they were false. It wasn't like a generalized, she wrote an article about me and said I was a domestic abuser. Very specific kinds of things. So here, it's like everything the person says, I think you have to drill down on the specific thing. Like this guy's a violent dude. That to me is hyperbole, statement of fact. But he's been known to almost hit people with his car. I would think that's a statement of fact.
Okay.
That's how I see it.
And the issue with, he's had run-ins with the law. Hey guys, you're innocent until proven guilty. So if there's no actual convictions for being violent against someone, that's false.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you, Corey. Have run-ins with the law. What does that mean? I got a ticket. I said hi to some cop, or some cop said hi to me. But it's a accurate statement theoretically, right? I had run-ins with the law. I mean, I don't like it.
Corey, would you say that's definitely? Would you say the hook there is the it's not capable of defamatory meaning?
I think it's loose enough where it's probably not defamatory.
Right.
But,
that's what I think too.
But if it was something along the lines of, he's I don't know, he abused his wife.
Oh yeah, I mean that's
something
yeah,
like
definitely.
That would be problematic if it's not true.
Okay. So let's kind of wrap up here a little bit. And Dawn, I want you just to give your kind of like non-lawyer opinion of this. I'll give you mine first. I'm all over the place on this. Like, in my opinion, tell me if guys backtrack me if I'm doing right. In my opinion, based on the limited knowledge that I have of this case, the developer doesn't seem like he's the most innocent person either. And I also feel like the owners were way out of base. Dawn, I don't see it. I could see both sides here, but I guess we're at the point where you're going to have to worry about it. If you're a board member, you're going to have to worry about getting sued, and maybe you could use this to sue people.
So I took it a step back. Remember, I started out this conversation. I said it really piqued my interest because there was a $1,500 a month assessment and a $10,000 special assessment. I said, whoa, what for? So to back up, I think the homeowners and all of our homeowners, and I live in a HOA myself, when we're not happy or we are concerned about issues, the first thing that I hear from people is I stopped paying my dues, or I'm not going to pay until I find out what this is. And that's really the wrong attitude. Why? Because first of all, you can see the function of the HOA or condo association is really paramount on you receiving the dues and then paying for the infrastructure and utilities, whatever it might be, insurance. So the homeowners, in taking that stance, sort of lost a leg for me, because I'm saying, well, let's put this in practical matters. What is your issue? And then proceed forward. And if the homeowners had such concerns about where their dues were going or what the budget actually was or whatever, or the infrastructure being built, bring that in a professional setting. Then that's where you communicate with the board, you ask questions. And if you don't receive response, reach out to your attorney and receive professional legal opinion before going online and making statements. I think this really polluted the waters and caused a much bigger issue. As you said, Ray, people are very sensitive to HOAs. It's in the news. It's a big, bad HOA. At the end of the day, we still have to run, and this builder may have other building opportunities, other developments. So it could be very hurtful to them in their sales and the value of the homes themselves in the community. It struck me too, is Okay, this is out there, homeowners. Now, what did you do to the value of your homes?
Okay, let's do closing thoughts. Dawn, I'm going to leave you there with that. Did you want to add anything else?
You know, I do. I want to speak to insurance really quick. Homeowners, you have homeowners insurance. So personal liability coverage, coverage E as in Edward, that is really important to make sure is endorsed to your coverage. And that is where if you are sued for slander and defamation, there may be some defense. However, most all insurance policies will not compensate for punitive damages where the judge feels that they have to make an example out of you and assess those further damages. Dave mentioned that the actual judgment was maybe $1, but the punitive damages far exceeded that amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the judge was trying to send a message. The insurance carriers consider that intentional and purposeful, and the insurance is there for sudden and accidental, unintentional acts. So here, this being an intentional act and the judge deeming it so, I would be hard pressed to see homeowners have insurance coverage for that.
I got a crazy question for you, Dawn. So there were some owner board members on the board, I believe. And I don't know if this was a scenario, but I'm just curious. So the developer's also on the board. He sues those board members that are the owner board members, but they're indemnified by the association. The association is controlled by the developer. Who's going to be picking up the tab here? Is it going to be the insurance company somewhere in the middle, or what's going to happen there?
The carrier has a duty to defend until they don't. And what would be the don't? Intentional acts. So in this situation, the defense may have been applied if they had discrimination, et cetera, included in there. We could get into an insured versus insured issue, board member versus developer who are on the board.
Yeah, please. I do want to ask you about that.
Yeah, a lot of our D&O
Just rephrase it for the audience, though. So real quick, tell everybody what board on board is, really reduced, because and then explain the developer and the owners are on the board. So
not all directors and officers policies are created equal, and I'm going to call a directors and officers policy D&O moving forward, just for clarification. So in a D&O policy, we have a duty to defend when a lawsuit comes in. In here, and I'm not saying specific to this case, but if we had homeowners and a developer board, builder board together, and the homeowner board members sue the developer board members, well, there could be an insured versus insured exclusion. The intent isn't for you guys to sue each other and use the insurance policy as your defense fund and indemnification. So one party would most likely have to have insurance to provide defense on their own. And in this case here, when we have a homeowner who's suing the board or board versus board, we can also get into the intentional acts. So here, the judge said that there was punitive damages assigned. Most of our policies do not include punitive damages. Now, there are D&O policies that do have the inclusion of punitive damages, but most do not. So it's more so of, yes, there may be some defense applied, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't ultimately seeing a carrier following through with the indemnification, which is the judgment that the judge applied.
And then I usually don't do this, but I want to do a plug for Dawn here. This is what you get when someone specializes in this field. Dawn sent this story to me. She's in tune with these kind of stories on a regular basis. This is why you want an insurance individual that knows this industry, because quite frankly, they're probably not going to know about it otherwise. And this is important stuff for people to know and be ahead of. And if you, someone like Dawn or someone else like her who specializes in this industry, you could possibly get, I can't guarantee it, but there's a good chance you're going to get a heads up on a lot of stuff and save yourself a lot of aggravation.
Well, insurance doesn't cover everything, and that's a common misnomer. You know, a question we used to get with auto insurance, do I have full coverage? No one has full coverage. It just doesn't exist. So we have to build a policy that's important, what's the main attributes of it. And so in these cases here, especially with punitive damages, no insurance carrier wants to insure a building that, you know, you call me in and say, hey, my building's on fire, can I get an insurance policy? And in this case here, we look pretty deep and say, this is a tough case. And I don't believe that our D&O policies would ultimately continue the defense and or provide indemnification. So
right.
It's, consult with your attorney. And if you have significant grievances, homeowners, don't take it upon yourself to go out there on social media. I think this, to me, what was so interesting and so important was to emphasize that we need to communicate in a more professional way. And accusations such as this can really be detrimental to all parties, including those who accuse the other member of improper behavior.
Well, up to this point, I pretty much have assumed it's been a free ride for people for the most part. I mean, obviously there's been lawsuits that we don't know about. All right, John, closing thoughts, words of wisdom, because remember, the other point I'm trying to make here for today is I'm not encouraging board members to sue their owners, but this kind of approach could also satisfy board members who feel like they're being smeared. But go ahead, John. Keep an eye on our time. Closing thoughts.
So there's a lot going on here. As much as I'd love to say this is a great case to support boards that are getting smeared, this happens often with condominiums and HOAs. Owners or disgruntled owners will smear the board. They'll ask me what can do. It's libel, it's slander, and I tell them, as Dave and Corey mentioned before, there's no monetary damages, so you really can't do anything. This is a little bit different because it involved a sponsor and there were monetary implications. But again, the punitive aspect, I think what this is a unique case anyway, because the extent of the full court press that the plaintiffs put on the sponsor controlled board was so over the top, and including going to various government officials, Facebook smears, and it was so bad that the court felt, and I'm reading right now from one of the early motions, there was nothing, the claim was there was nothing in the record before the court to show that the plaintiffs were going to win the case, and show that either the board or the HOA acted with gross negligence or bad faith. In fact, the opposite shows that despite the detrimental and obstructionist actions of the plaintiffs, the defendants acted to the best of their abilities to fulfill their obligations. That's the gut of this case, is that the full court press and smearing of the plaintiffs, I think the judge felt that just was way over the top, and it spectacularly backfired on the plaintiffs. So can we use this as a lesson in my state, New York? I would love it to be able to do so, because there's too many times where disgruntled homeowners will get on a platform to just smear the board with no consequences. So I kind of like that aspect of it, but unfortunately, I think it's specific to the situation here, which involved a sponsor-controlled board.
Dawn, if you're not comfortable with this, just tell me. But I kind of want to stick up for the owners a little bit. Now, here I go. I know I'm back and forth. This developer has been accused of some, there's other things going on. I'm not by any means, if somebody dives deep into saying this is the most innocent individual, he could be, but I don't want to totally dump on the owners here too. Are you feeling what I'm feeling? Because you're a little bit familiar with this. I mean, there's a lot of bad players here.
I think overall, we rush to assumptions in life. Oftentimes we hear something or think something and we don't have all the facts. And in this case, in other cases, it's really about facts and details and coming together and having communications. And if we can't, then we impart legal opinion and advice. Here, I think, again, I look at this and I say, they went real life. And once you take this outside of the association, it's a whole different ballgame. And I see a lot of times in bringing up defamation, I serve on the board, you don't like me, and maybe you're unhappy, and you call my job, and you complain about my job, and you say things about me, and I lose my job. Well, that could be something a board member could certainly have concern with and want to sue for. So I look at this and I say, I think we just need to be mindful that we need to stay focused on what our true goal is and not get lost in the minutia and start to badmouth and defame Because I've also seen situations where people start off in a really rocky way, and then they actually come together in the end and have a meeting of minds.
All right, so I'm going to do closing thoughts with Dave and then Corey. You know, Dave, one thing that came to mind was something with yourself, and I'll tell you why. You really are a dog lover, and dogs, your ability to go to the shelter is very important to you. Would you agree? You get a lot of satisfaction from helping animals.
Yeah.
If someone said something about you online that you abused animals, you've never been accused of any of these things. But if someone applied that or said that, and that impacted your ability to go to the shelter, or the shelter asked you about it and said, hey, Dave, we're not too keen about having you come in anymore because we read this about you online. Even if someone said, in my opinion, that would be still defamation, would it not? Or you would have damages, correct?
I might have financial damages, but I'd have what are called nominal damages, something a court would recognize. In New Jersey, nominal damages are $500. If you prove defamation, one instance of defamation, one statement, it's $500. That's what's called nominal. Otherwise, you have to prove actual damages. I think
What
that,
about your
yeah,
emotional damage, Dave, though? Because honestly, you
it's
love
very
that. And
difficult,
if
but it's
someone,
never it's difficult to prove that. I'd have to,
uh,
what am I gonna say? I have to go to a therapist and see a psychiatrist? Because I mean, like
well,
you'd have to come up with real, like I'm unable to work. I hide under my bed 6 months
well,
because of
I
this. I
think
have to prove it.
this is a good lesson to be learned here because I would feel like you would be entitled. I would feel awful if someone did that to you. And I would like
Well,
to
I
see
would
them
be
after,
entitled.
if someone lied
I
about you online and you couldn't do that anymore, I would love to see you slam them and get a bunch of money. I would
I would
love it.
be
And
entitled to it. I'd be entitled to a verdict of defamation and nominal damages, but I'm not sure I'd be entitled to big money because I haven't been hurt. Big money. I mean, that's just the way the law works. I can't get a windfall. I can't get money from somebody if I haven't actually lost money. I'm okay. I'm okay with that concept. Punitive damages are meant to be used to do that. But in your hypothetical, I don't think punitive damages would be warranted. I think in terms of this overall issue, it's really time, place, and manner. It's like Corey mentioned this, Dawn said this a second ago. If you're in a community with and you with a developer controlled board or not, and you write in a newsletter or you hand out a leaflet just to your owners, and you say, I think this board's corrupt, I think the developer's taking our money, I'm very concerned about it, I wouldn't be surprised if there's theft. And you say that's only to your fellow owners, I think you'd probably be protected. That's probably protected speech. But if you hand that out at the local supermarket, I think that's a different story, right? John might have made this point before about sort of like beyond to the public. These guys were going on television doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That changes the dynamic a little bit. And these owners do need to be careful about that. So even in my world where I'm very skeptical of defamation, if someone brought to me something where they were going outside the world that the statement concerned, that would give me more reason to think there was validity to it. I also think that owners have to be careful when they're making statements not vis-a-vis the association, like, and their neighbors who are governing the place. Those statements are considered more democratic, push and pull. Democrats are corrupt, Republicans are corrupt. That kind of stuff is all considered like democracy inside of the neighborhood. But when you're dealing with the developer and you're talking about the developer, then you have real damages. Like the developer could establish the fact that it has lost money because of things you put on television or things you put on social media. It is conceivable that someone could come into court and testify, I was going to buy a house for $700,000 until I read this Facebook post and I decided not to buy it. That's possible. And that's a concern. And that's unlikely to be the case at an HOA because the HOA itself is not losing money. It's not losing a customer. It doesn't really have customers, but developers could lose clients, could lose buyers. It's very possible they could.
Corey, I'm going to go to you on closing thoughts, and then I'm going to say goodbye, but I don't want you guys to leave because I have a question I have to ask you, and I'm going to put it back and edit in, and if I can, because Dave brought it up. But let me get you to go, and I'll let you guys out of here, I promise, but I'm dying to ask this. But Corey, closing thoughts, take us out of this session.
Yeah, and as a community member, be skeptical of what other community members are saying at meetings. Just because they say something is happening and they bring paperwork and they're pointing to statutes and saying this is illegal, they have no idea half the time what they're talking about. and I see people get sucked into the mob mentality, to the point where now they're donating money to a cause, and they're going to get sucked into litigation where I love litigating, but I'm always trying to talk people out of litigating because it will consume years of your life. This issue that happened in this one meeting can drag on for 5, 6, 7 years, and you can't get out of it very easily. And you're just bleeding money out of your pocket. So, be careful of mob mentality, and play the long game. Think about it. Talk to your lawyers.
I think a lawyer could have helped out a lot on this one. I want to thank everybody for being here. Like, don't go anywhere if you guys don't mind. I'm dying to ask you this question with something Dave brought up. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll put the link in what I asked these guys. If you want to, I'll throw it on YouTube or something, or you can just stay here actually and just follow up on it. But thank you so much for being here. Much appreciated. So, Dave, you had commented in our live stream about defamation that when things go from within the board meeting, you can maybe get away with it if it's in the board meeting, but it goes into the public realm, maybe you go on TV or something, it's a whole different ball game, possibly. I'm thinking Facebook. Dave, isn't Facebook the public realm?
Well, these are all factual things you'd have to go through. This is why Corey mentioned these things take 5 to 6 years. You're talking about the minute specifics of every single thing you say. There'd be discovery on this Facebook page. Who is a subscriber? Who read it? Who's the administrator of the page? Who deleted it? Who edited the post? If I'm thinking about, and in my hypothetical I said a minute ago, I mentioned typing up a piece of paper and handing it out to owners at their houses. I specifically did that because that made the hypothetical. I created a hypothetical in which only owners were receiving the statement. Once social media is in play, it's a lot more difficult for me as the statement perpetrator to claim I only said it to my neighbors. And they understood what I meant. They understood elder abuse meant that you're treating old people like, treating old people badly. They knew it because they know me from the pool, and I say that all the time. That's why my hypothetical was about I printed up something on a paper and I handed it only to my neighbors at their homes. Once I go on Instagram or Facebook, it's more difficult for me to be able to credibly say that the recipients of my statement were only my neighbors. And that could take years to prove or disprove. I had a case, I don't know how long you want to talk about this, but I've had a defamation case where the association disseminated something and they used an email list. They disseminated a resolution that contained what one owner believed to be defamatory statements. Okay. The resolution was a corporate resolution. It was adopted by the board correctly, and the board decided they wanted to disseminate it to the owners because they wanted the owners to know that the board took that corporate action. But it became relevant to the case as to whether or not the email list included anyone that was not an owner. Tenants, father-in-law, a guy who's a power of attorney of someone who's an owner. The nuance of who received the resolution became relevant because if non-owners received it, there was a different standard of law applied. And I think that's a good approach to the law, which is if you want to get the protection of the free speech protections we have in our country, then you do have to do some things that Corey was mentioning. You got to be a little circumspect in how you operate. You can't do the shotgun approach. If you want to exercise your right to free speech about a particular issue, then limit your speech to the people who actually care about it and not just make it to the public, which then suggests you're not looking to change something you're not looking to debate and change something. You're looking to punish and embarrass someone. And that's different.
Why didn't you say this in the beginning?
Now you make me talk.
That was excellent.
All right, John, commentary.
I'm always nervous that John's going to cut me off because he always wants to keep talking. He never sits quietly.
Go ahead, John. You want to add anything, or did we cover it?
I mean, we covered everything.
Right.
I think my big takeaway for New York condominiums is
just don't redo the whole. Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to stick. You're doing the Facebook thing, right?
Yeah, this is ammunition to deal with the smears that you might get from some disgruntled owners, but keep it in perspective because you have, most of the times, hopefully you haven't been financially damaged.
Corey, I never knew this concept that Dave brought up about it going into the public realm. So Florida, what do you think about that? Like handing out a letter to owners is one thing, but then it gets out on Facebook is another.
I think it increases the probability of damaging reputation. You know, if one person hears something, your reputation might not be damaged as much, but once it gets to hundreds or thousands of people, the likelihood of it getting to your boss or a client increases the probability of that substantially to the amount where you might have damages that you might not have had if it was just limited to the meeting.
Dave, I'm so glad you brought that up. That is so interesting.
Well,
All
yeah,
right.
and just say one thing. In New Jersey, the aspect of who gets the statement, who sees it, who reads it, is relevant to damages, like Corey mentioned, but it's also relevant to whether you get privilege. In my hypothetical with the resolution sent to people, the board members were asserting the right to privilege, meaning you can't sue us for defamation really very easily because we're entitled to privilege. And the privilege was available to them only to the extent they could show that they disseminated the statement in a limited way. If they could prove that they disseminated the resolution only to owners, then the judge was going to give them privilege, because the judges are going to say, yeah, you know what? Even if what you said was stupid or wrong or even slanderous or defamatory, you only sent it to the people in your building, so you had a reasonable basis to do it. So I'm going to give you a break. So I think it goes to damages, but also goes to whether or not it's more easy for you to win, because if you're only sending it to your owners, you're entitled to what we call qualified privilege, and that makes it a lot easier for you to win a defamation case if you're the defendant.